Be sure to order your copy of the Go-Go Offense by Coach Brennan Marion on footballgameplan.com/GoGoOffense. Coach Marion goes through the ins and outs of his explosive offense, one that's tearing up the college football field and putting a lot of points on the scoreboard. Again, you can order your copy at footballgameplan.com/GoGoOffense. As always, we love to start the show by taking a look at some of the teams that are on upset alert this upcoming weekend. In North Carolina, A&T and Duke meet up in North Carolina in what should be a very good defensive matchup. And I thought A&T played with tremendous balance in their Week 1 victory over Elon. Quarterback Khalil Carter did a fantastic job of not only distributing the football to many different targets, but also avoiding the costly mistake. The same can't be said about Duke quarterback Quentin Harris, who tossed 2 interceptions as the Blue Devils offense couldn't take advantage of early stellar defensive play. The Aggies proved that they could still get after the quarterback, sacking Elon 5 times. And I think we'll see another A&T takedown of an FBS opponent, this time of the ACC variety. I like the Aggies. The Labor Day Classic between Tuskegee and Alabama State are always very close contests, with the Golden Tigers pulling off the upset a few years ago. This year, Tuskegee should be good once again as returning quarterback Ahmad Daramis leads a passing attack that does a great job of complementing their ground game. They will have to be excellent against Alabama State, who nearly pulled off their own upset last week against UAB. What a job Hornets head coach Donald Hill-Ely has done with this program, changing a culture and developing a killer instinct mentality throughout this squad. I foresee that continuing this week as they'll take care of business against the Golden Tigers of Tuskegee. The Black Bears travel to Statesboro to take on Georgia Southern, where this game is still being played despite Hurricane Dorian barreling down the southeastern coastline, and we'll definitely monitor this situation moving forward. On the field, it'll be up to that Maine defense to reset the line of scrimmage to stop the spread option attack of Georgia Southern. If they can steal away a few possessions in this game, that'll be a huge win. Now, I love what I saw last week from the Black Bears passing attack with quarterback Chris Ferguson throwing for over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns against Sacred Heart. Now, judging by what we witnessed that Eagles secondary go through against LSU, I'd say Ferguson and that receiving core can't wait to meet up with Georgia Southern. I like the upset here against the Eagles. It'll be a close one, but look for Maine to continue its impressive start to the 2019 season.
I think the FCS gives a student athlete a chance to really develop in the classroom and on the field. And I don't think there's anything that gets in the way of the development of the student athlete. You know, whereas in sometimes other conferences, other levels of play, I think there's some things that could sway a student athlete in a wrong direction here or there. But I think at the FCS level, I think it's all about the student athlete. I think it's all about his development in the classroom and also on the playing field. And it really it keeps your values and your goals right in front of you. And I think there's less things that are going to take you away from those things.
Howard looks to rebound against Youngstown State this weekend at Stanball Stadium. The Bison came out flat against the Maryland Terrapins last weekend, and offensively speaking, they have to be better. That's just point blank, period. The Penguins made light work of Sanford in the FCS kickoff game in week 0, and it was great to see their defense get back to their playmaking ways. Make it 2 in a row for the Fighting Bo Pellinis. I like Youngstown State. We have 2 new FCS programs this year in Merrimack and Long Island University, both in the NEC, and we'll start with Merrimack first as they head to Central Connecticut State to take on the Blue Devils. Now, the Warriors got off to a great start last week, knocking off Virginia University of Lynchburg 45-14. Now, I like how they're built up front. They could pose a serious challenge against the Blue Devils. Now, Central Connecticut State was able to get a victory in the Bronx last week against Fordham, which saw a stellar performance from cornerback Dexter Lawson, earning himself Defensive Player of the Week in the NEC. The Blue Devils will need a much better effort up front along the offensive line to avoid the upset, which I think they will get. I like Central Connecticut State. Long Island draws the tougher matchup for their first ever Division I game as they travel to third-ranked South Dakota State. The Sharks lost a ton of offensive firepower to graduation as they're coming off another Division II playoff appearance. There are some bright spots to look forward to this season as they have wide receiver Derek Eugene, running back Tim Marinan, and quarterback Clay Beathard to provide some juice on that side of the ball. Defensively, they'll be led by defensive lineman Abel Joseph, who's versatile enough to play anywhere up front. The Jackrabbits nearly knocked off the Golden Gophers last weekend, and I was very impressed with their defense, especially the way they played on the opposite side of Minnesota's line of scrimmage. I like South Dakota State in this ball game. Should be a good opportunity for them to work on some things offensively that went awry last week in Minneapolis. Another big matchup on the Week 2 slate with the Citadel traveling to Elon. The Bulldogs defense did a solid job last week against Towson, in my opinion. I thought they competed well and kept the Tigers offense guessing. Now offensively, their option attack is as good as anyone's in the country and figures to be a challenge for Elon. And speaking of the Phoenix, their offensive line has to be much better in this ball game as they gave up 5 sacks last week against North Carolina A&T. In this game versus the Citadel, it's all about maximizing the possessions that you have and, in a way, taking some of the air out of the ball yourself by putting pressure on the Citadel to score every time they have the ball. I don't see a high-scoring affair in this one, but I do see the Citadel going into Elon and winning the game. New Hampshire opens up their 2019 season against Holy Cross with former star Wildcat quarterback Ricky Santos as the interim head coach. He's stepping in for Sean McDonald, who's taking a leave of absence to deal with the medical issue. Now, Santos is a great offensive mind and comes in after being the quarterback coach for Columbia the last 3 seasons. The former Peyton Award winner has his hands full in this matchup against Holy Cross that figures to be a factor in the Patriot League race. The Crusaders under second-year head coach Bob Chesney does a great job of spreading the ball and getting multiple playmakers the ball in space. Defensively, there are some growing pains, especially within the front 7, and that was evident last week in a loss versus Navy. Remember, this was a squad last year that had 2 studs in Ryan Brady and Teddy Capsis. Both guys have graduated and moved on. Now, despite what happened last week, I still think game experience matters, and I like them in this one because of that very reason. Look for the Crusaders to start fast against New Hampshire. This is a big out-of-conference game for both North Alabama and Montana. The Lions are fresh off of a drubbing of Western Illinois of the Missouri Valley Conference and hope to hand the Big Sky's Grizzlies the same fate. In order for that to happen, North Alabama will need to have an encore performance from a defense that harassed Western Illinois all game long on both ends. Now, Montana's Dalton Snead is coming off of a strong game in a win against South Dakota, but has to avoid costly turnovers against a defense in North Alabama that'll be extra aggressive in trying to get the upset. I like the Grizzlies in this ball game. Head coach Bobby Hawk has his team playing really well, and they'll avoid the slip-up against a very good Lions squad in Missoula. We get treated to 2 excellent QBs in the Central Arkansas Austin Peay game as the Bears' Braylon Smith and Jeremiah Oatsvall of the Governors can put the ball anywhere they want to on the football field. With that being the backdrop, the challenge will fall on the defense to affect the pocket and disrupt the timing. Now, Central Arkansas does a fantastic job of protecting the quarterback. Now, defensively is where they'll have to tighten up as they face a ground attack of Austin Peay that has one of the best in the FCS in Kentel Williams. I thought Austin Peay was excellent last week against North Carolina Central. Now, was that the defense that was great, or was it the opponent that wasn't so good? That's what makes this game so intriguing, in my opinion. I like the Governors in this one. Ball control will be the name of the game, and I think Austin Peay's run game will lead them to a tight victory against Central Arkansas. Dayton kicks off their season in Terre Haute, Indiana as they take on Indiana State. Tight end Adam Troutman is the player to watch for the Flyers as he's a matchup problem that the Sycamores will have to deal with in the passing game. He's also on the Senior Bowl watch list. And speaking of that Sycamores defense, they're coming off of an excellent game, in my opinion, against the Kansas Jayhawks. Linebacker Clayton Glasgow had himself a day and figures to close out his senior season pushing for all Missouri Valley Conference honors. I think the Sycamores will win this one against Dayton. Indiana State looks strong on both sides of the ball and will be a threat the rest of the way. In what will be a conference game in 2020, North Dakota takes on North Dakota State out there in Fargo in the Fargo Dome. For the Fighting Hawks, we may see Andrew Zimmerman in this game as starting quarterback Nate Ketteringham had an injury last week against Drake. Now, whether it's Ketteringham or Zimmerman, both guys looked impressive throwing the football, and I think that'll be the way they'll have to beat North Dakota State. The Bison do a great job of making teams one-dimensional, and it usually starts with them taking away the run. It was a great debut for North Dakota State redshirt freshman QB Trey Lance, who did damage on the ground and through the air. I was also impressed with their defense. I think it'll be up to linebacker Jabril Cox to help keep this running game of North Dakota in check, which I believe will happen. I like North Dakota State in a close one. And now it's time for our Stats FCS Game of the Week preview between Southeast Missouri State and Montana State. Now, the Bobcats had issues last week against Texas Tech's up-tempo passing game. Obviously, they won't face that type of passing game in this matchup, but if you're Southeast Missouri State, you definitely want to push the pace offensively to keep the Bobcats off balance. Where Montana State can help themselves out in this one is by using their own offense as their best defense. There are some opportunities to be had in a running game against Southeast Missouri State. I think they'll just have to make sure those drives will end up in points, whether it's 3 or 7 points add up. For the Red Hawks, I like what they did once they got into the groove of the game against Southern Illinois. SEMO started to play much better defense and started to take much more chances offensively. The only worry is that if they get off to a slow start in that regard against Montana State, it could be over. I think they go on the road and take care of business against the Bobcats. I like SEMO. Teams that can push the pace tend to give the Bobcats problems, and they'll run into that in this one against the Red Hawks. Before we get out of here, head over to iTunes and subscribe to Football Game Plan Podcast, where you can find our FCS Opening Drive podcast, where David Hassagen and myself give you the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the hows surrounding the FCS. And also be on the lookout for our FCS Whip Around hitting our YouTube channel at youtube.com/footballgameplan, where our FCS correspondents get you up to speed on what to look out for this upcoming weekend in the FCS.